The voice of sharing, Durian ASEAN.
Hi, this is your host Arlene at Monday Morning Matters, where we provide perspectives from this region. Today, we are going to talk about Malaysia's migrants. Time for a rights-based policy? Recently, Malaysia was hit hard with the news of the signing of Memorandum of Understanding between Malaysia and Bangladesh to bring in 1.5 Bangladeshi workers in the country. What followed was negative backlashes and xenophobic sentiments from the Malaysian public, as well as questions about the relevance of having more migrant workers in. What's lacking was the question about human rights of the migrant workers, who are often being looked down as second-class citizens, not to mention they are more often being exploited by a system that treats these workers as perishable commodities. I will be speaking with Adrian Pereira, the Executive Director of North-South Initiative and a staunch human rights activist on migrant workers. He has been working with migrants for years and is calling for a rights-based approach. In this segment, I'll be discussing with Adrian on why Malaysia has yet to sign and ratify the international conventions to protect the rights of migrant workers.
Monday Morning Matters.
Perspectives from Southeast Asia.
First of all, I want to say thank you for coming and sharing your views at Durian ASEAN.
Thanks, Arlene. I'm always happy to be here and having discussions, critical discussions with you on various Malaysian and regional topics.
Before we go straight to the topic, I want to discuss on the context that we are facing right now. Are we getting an influx of migrant workers in comparison to the past?
According to the news reports and what our government has been saying, there have been plans to bring in migrant workers, particularly the Bangladeshis. But if you look at today's paper, we're getting mixed signals. We can't really say for sure how many have already come in. In terms of the process also, I think there are many questions that have popped up. There's not enough clarity of how it is being done. Even myself, after talking to people from the Human Resource Ministry and different activists, I myself am struggling and grappling to get the truth of what's really happening. Yep.
And you yourself, you have been working with migrant workers on various issues before this.
Yes, me and a few friends in my organization, we are part of the ASEAN Forum on Migrant Labour. Even within the ASEAN system, governments and different nations are trying to find the best formulas to make migrant labour work. Coming from a human rights background, part of my duty is to ensure that processes rights are done using a rights-based approach based on international human rights standards. So in Malaysia, we still don't have a very positive or encouraging record of human rights issues. So one of our concern is how are these migrant workers going to be treated once they are here in Malaysia. Me and a few colleagues, my counterparts from different countries, we already started collaborating for the past 2-3 years, not just handling cases, but trying to develop best policies to ensure migration happens in a rights-based manner.
I see. Can you define what rights-based mean?
So rights-based means or refers to a particular process which is based on a certain standard. For example, you have to follow the different international laws, in particularly the United Nations standards on human rights. For example, for migration, there is a convention called the International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of Their Families. So this document was adopted by the General Assembly of the UN in 1990. But as you all know, conventions are only applied when a country signs and ratifies a particular document. Malaysia is not a signatory, so they may not choose to follow all the articles in the convention, but we can still use the standards to ensure that policy based on these rights are followed and implemented along the way. When you look at a rights-based approach, the 5 core principles are participation, accountability, non-discrimination, empowerment, and of course linking to international standards. So when we talk about rights-based approach, we must take into consideration these 5 principles.
And Malaysians, are they aware about the sort of international conventions that Malaysia needs to commit to?
Malaysians, in general, they know at a very basic level, but there's still a lot of work to help socialize these ideas into action, into advocacy, and of course, most importantly, into policy. Once it's in policy, then we have more protection of rights for not just Malaysians, but also for our migrant workers.
Are the protections adequate in our employment law towards the migrant workers?
According to officials and even the trade unions, according to the labor law, it should apply to everyone regardless of nationality. So if migrant workers are supposed to get equal rights, but there are certain elements which actually do not fall under migrant rights. For example, there's different standards for compensation when an accident happens. So of course Malaysians are covered by SOCSO, but migrant workers have a different insurance system, which even that also has way much more lower compensations for accidents. So that is one of the flaws in the rights protection for migrant workers. Besides that, another huge and quite disturbing point which I would like to raise is the domestic workers, for example. Till today, Malaysia doesn't have specific law for domestic workers.
You mean to all domestic workers, or
No.
depends on the countries that they are from?
To all. We don't have a law for domestic workers. So what happens
But
is...
Malaysia do sign MOU, for example, with the Philippines or with Indonesia on certain provisions that they want towards their
correct.
citizens.
So there's a difference between MOU and law. MOU may be country specific, but it doesn't provide a blanket protection for all. And this is one of the problems when it comes to standards, because once you start differing for standards for different nationalities, there's already an inequality gap there itself. You can see when it comes to enforcement, the MOU may not have as much of a weight as compared to a law. So that's one of the big gaps which we have to bridge very urgently. So one big example is even though labor law says that you should be given your day off and also your holidays, many domestic workers don't have that opportunity or that right to a day off in a week. So it's quite a serious offense and violation.
Law and policies are things that the government need to deal with. What about Malaysians, the public? Do they tend to abuse their right as an employer towards migrant workers and, in this case, domestic workers?
We have seen quite a lot of cases in the media, and I'm not going to generalize or pretend that I have exact statistics. From the cases reported in the newspapers, some have been quite violent, a bit extremely violent, and I think to the extent of that. What causes Malaysians to behave like this? Even though I mean not everyone, of course, but it is one of the indicator that our knowledge and respect towards migrant workers is quite minimal, and everyone has to work hard to fill this gap soon.
Why Malaysians in general acted that way?
I have a few conspiracy theories, but based on the outbursts on social media also, it's quite disturbing because the impact on migrant workers will be quite deep and permanent, and to undo the damage will take a bit more time. So Malaysians, we have not really had much open and safe space to discuss about rights. I don't think it's part of our education system. I don't think it's part of public general discussions. I'm very sure politicians from all sides of the political divide know about the human rights standards. So when education happens or information is disseminated, there's a big gap in how human rights is part of that. I do believe that Malaysians need to take their own initiative to learn what is these rights that we always talk about. And once we know a bit more, hopefully that is translated into respect for everyone's dignity regardless of nationality, race and color. Historically and even till now, I think Malaysians still grapple with the big question of racism in the country. Even to combat racism, the UN has a standard called CERD, Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, which we are also unfortunately not a signatory. All the standards are there. Now, as Malaysian citizens, as civil society, we need to bridge these gaps.
I see, that's true. Anyway, this is the end of our first segment. We will continue more discussion on the second segment of the interview.
Monday Morning Matters
Perspectives from Southeast Asia.
Thanks for tuning in to Durian ASEAN with me, Arlene. For more interviews by Durian ASEAN, please tune in to our website at durianasean.com. If you're on the go, you can always download our TuneIn app on your mobile. Please subscribe to our YouTube channels at Durian ASEAN and Durian ASEAN TV. Don't forget to follow us on our Facebook page, Twitter and Instagram. We always welcome feedback from our listeners. Stay tuned with Monday Morning Matters on every Monday, same time at 10 to 11 a.m. on GMT Plus 8. Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing.
You're now listening to Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing.